There's a handful, right? Which a psychiatrist and MD can prescribe whatever they want.
Right.
A PhD clinical psychologist, there's just a few medications that they're able to prescribe.
Right.
Oh, right. Okay.
And they're the tip of their spear is cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So like really getting knee deep, and then psychoanalysis as well. But that's a separate certification. Someone like me, I'm a broadsword, right? Where like a Jordan Peterson is a scalpel. I'm a broadsword when it comes to human behavior. So I take in different perspectives of different cultures, right? What's going on in the brain, what's going on with the neuroscience, and just we mesh it all together.
You study serial killers?
No.
Do you want to?
No, I
You
don't.
interested? Because we can close. We're glad that you're here. We're gonna go ahead and. now that we got you here,
That's just, and a fucking Cube Smart Stores space in the middle of fucking BFE, bro. That's great. For the love of God.
Do you study serial killers?
Never mind. I got two podcasts.
100 grams.
Hey guys, how you doing? Kevin Gallagher and Sonny Parlin from the Old Man Grappling Hour here to talk about our number one sponsor, the OG himself, Troy Regano from No Judges Needed. If you need any apparel, any hats, gis, shirts, anything you could possibly think of that is jiu-jitsu related, go check out No Judges Needed at nojudgesneeded.com. Troy Regano is one of my oldest training partners, one of my best friends in the world, and it is a black belt owned and operated business that's been in existence for quite a long time. They're probably one of the oldest jiu-jitsu apparel companies around. So if you're interested, go check out the OG's longtime friend of the show, Troy Regano at nojudgesneeded.com. Sonny, anything?
Yeah.
Well, we are both pretty, but neither one of us are as pretty as our guest today.
You wrote that?
Right here in my notes. not that I was thinking about it or anything. Today we have Dr. Gino Collura. He is a behavioral Collura. That's what we do.
Every time.
I'm gonna do it 5-6 times. I'm in that Collura. Dr. Gino Collura. He is a behavioral scientist that has done a great deal of work with veterans and veterans that deal with PTSD in specific, and how jiu-jitsu and a better approach to life can help them deal with that. So, Gino, thank you very much for coming to the show today.
Oh, thank you both, man. It's a pleasure.
How did you guys meet? Or better question is, how did this low rent motherfucker eventually get into your circle?
It's amazing to me the connections I figured out and stumble my way across. How did we meet?
Dude, so you were still training up at South,
right?
And I was doing my field work,
right?
So I was actually,
right.
If you recall, right? Like I had a whole thing, and Matt opened up the school to me to interview, right, and work with guys there for my research,
right?
And that's where you and I connected.
But there was another way.
You researched jiu-jitsu, guys?
We're gonna get that. It's actually a pretty good research study. I met you another day though. I met you somehow through the jiu-jitsu times. We connected sometimes because the first time I actually I had met you in passing. But I wrote that article for the Jiu-Jitsu Times.
Yeah.
It had to be 5-6 years after.
It was
somehow or another we crossed paths, and I don't remember how it worked, but I was writing an article about PTSD and how it affects.
I think it was through Roddy, because Roddy's my coach.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
I know you guys
probably,
right. And
probably,
so probably in conversation. I think something came up.
Roddy Ferguson, former guest of the show. We're gonna have him on too. Roddy's a fucking blast. Roddy's a great guest.
He's very, very animated.
So anyway, enough about Roddy.
He brings it.
Let's talk about Gino. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started, where you came from, some of your history.
No, man, 100%, dude. So. Geographically, right? So born and raised in Tampa. I've been in Tampa my whole life, right? Minus a 3.5-year stint that I lived in South America, specifically in Colombia, and used to be in the executive protection anti-kidnapping industry, right? So did that for a handful of years, and came back, man, and took a year off just to kind of cool out and unplug and de-stress, because it was just a different mentality, different perspective. And some things happened when I was down there. I met some guys in the Colombian military that kind of turned me on to a different way of viewing trauma, right? And I knew I wanted to study that, and I wanted to understand it more. And then I started my doctorate degree at USF, And man, after that, the rest was history.
We might need more time with you because you can't just brush over. I was in the anti-kidnapping business.
Oh, we're gonna run the whole gamut.
So what were you? What were you there for in your official capacity?
Yeah, man. So I was what they call a PhD agent, right? So protective services detail. This is a fancy way of saying a bodyguard, right?
Okay.
But I like to always like give context, right? It's not like the cool jazzy thing that people think when they see a Hollywood movie. It's actually a pretty monotonous line of work, at least on the side of it that I was in, right? So like, when you think of working in a non-permissive environment in a third world country, you automatically think like, good guys kicking in doors and going after bad guys, right? Well, the kind of work that we did, it was all about logistics, planning, intelligence gathering. Your job's to avoid threats, like avoid problems by any stretch of the imagination. So we had a great liaison with Colombia military. They would provide support for us when we had like a legitimate VIP come in that had a target on their back. But outside of that, it was a lot of analysis, a lot of threat assessments as well.
But you were in a private company doing
private
this?
company.
How did you get that job? I mean, what qualified you to do that?
Yeah, so I went to executive protection school, a few different executive protection schools.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
There's a school for that.
oh yeah,
there's several
of them. Yeah, it's a big business. It's a big business,
I always thought that the guys in that job were just like
ex-military.
Yeah,
or freaking,
like ex-
A lot of them probably are,
Yeah.
but there's also you can actually still go to school for it. Yeah,
110%,
Yeah.
right? So as a civilian, right, you absolutely can go, right, and get training to be an executive protection agent.
Wow.
There's no two ways about it, right? So now, with that being said, right, qualifications matter, right? So like you're not going to be dropped into an area, right? Afghanistan, for example, like that's going to be a DoD contract, and you're going to have guys who are former SF, former SEAL,
Right.
like that sort of thing, right? In an environment that's still non-permissive, but there's hot zones, right? Like, avoid the hot zones, and if you can avoid them, you have to go in them. You bring military liaison with you, right? So
Okay.
you make sure you have that backup there, right? So at the end of the day, you're still providing bodyguard protection, but at the same token, you're not sped up, like wound up, super hardcore, hard charging. It's not that kind of a job, right? If that makes sense.
So some of I mean, again, I've interviewed you several times, so we can just do this by chatting along. But
Sure.
one of the things that really impressed me a lot was when you talked about working with these guerrilla people and particularly their views on how PTSD or stress, and they had a bunch of the Spanish terminologies that were utilized to talk about it, and how they had their religion to purge themselves, and some of the ways that focused you to think about how it could help civilians with PTSD, and some of the way jiu-jitsu focuses on that. So
Yeah, man. So this is where I kind of got the bug, I should say, right? As far as really wanting to take a deep dive into human behavior, right? So I had a dear friend of mine who was a captain in the Army, and a unit in Colombia called La Jungla. La Jungla just translates to the jungle, right? It's the jungle unit. So think our Green Berets pretty much, right? But it's their version of it, right? And so he and I were out one night at a bar, right? Because it's Colombia, that's what you do when you're chilling, right? And I was very, very impressed by their operational tempo, right? So what do I mean by operational tempo? Like, so you think of our guys, right? So they get deployed, they go overseas, they do bad things to bad people, right? And then they come back. But their deployment, dude, sometimes it's anywhere, depending on the unit, right? 6 months all the way up to 15 months, right? Just depending on what they do and who they're around. These guys do this every single day because the fight's in their backyard. So like they're in a gunfight at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they're home by 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
They're fighting drug cartels. It's less
people who know what they're doing.
Right,
like,
exactly.
A lot of people underestimate, right, the cartel. Like they have good training. They have good stuff.
They pay for it.
100%, right?
And there's something to be said for operational tempo. I mean, Rob Kahn used to talk about that when he was talking about us being in Afghanistan and Iraq for all those years.
Yeah.
Basically, our special teams.
Hit that thing again. We're even now.
our special operations forces were working almost every day out there.
Yeah.
And they were getting reps.
Yep.
He was of course explaining it in terminology of jiu-jitsu, but
Of course.
and how reps help. But yeah, so our special operations were getting rep after rep after rep. So I imagine that these guys that were down there were pretty good at what they did.
They were amazing at what they did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really impressive, right? But that's what really got me, right? So like, 4 o'clock in the morning, you're a commando, right? And then 3 o'clock in the afternoon, your dad taking daughter to ballerina practice, and you're having to be a husband, and all these different things, right? Where like, when you're deployed halfway across the world, you are carrying the identity of being an operator 24/7,
Right.
Like that you are an operator. That's your sole job. where these guys are having to manage different components of their identity at any given time.
Right.
And
Back,
so
straight from the field back to home with their families.
Right. And it was so impressive how good they were at it,
Right.
right. And that's the part that really, really got to me. So this captain and I, so we're having drinks one night and we're talking. I asked him, how do you do it? Right. And he goes, for you guys, right, in a clinical context, right, what you consider battlefield trauma related to PTSD, right, it's a clinical thing for you. For us, it's not, right. It's a spiritual experience. And what did he mean by that? So what you call PTSD, we call demonios de guerra, right, which is demons of war, right? So if I start feeling the insomnia, the hypervigilance, right, like I can't focus, I'm always thinking that something around the corner, a bottle drops, or there's a big bang, gunfights. For us, we're being possessed by either the spirit of someone who we've killed, right, or men that we have lost under our command. So it is mandatory for them, right? They go to church every week and they go to confession, right? What happens there internally for them is they feel like they're cleansed, right? Like I can't, in their minds, they're telling themselves, I can't handle this. This is a supernatural event, and God, I need you to take it off my plate for me, right? And once they do that, they feel completely absolved, and they can continue to do what it is that they do best. So that's what worked for them, right? So it doesn't mean it's right or it's wrong. It's just what worked.
It's funny, and again, I don't want to get too off base now because I don't want to get too off the topic because I want to keep where you're going, but. Yeah. I recently did a psilocybin treatment, and it's very, very. I've read a great deal of research on it and why it works and the process of why it works. And the point I'm trying to make is that there is something that happens inside of the brain that creates our consciousness. And no matter how far we've come in science, we haven't gotten to the real reason why we do the things we do, and the reason why the brain functions in the way we do. We kind of understand the physiological processes of why people are depressed and what happens where in the brain, but we don't really understand why it happens. And there's no other way but the reality of some form of a spiritual nature, and whether or not it's truly spiritual. I'm not here to say that God exists or God doesn't exist. I don't know what your beliefs are, or what God you follow, whatever. Right. But the reality of us believing that there is a spiritual nature to this world, which will in turn take away that pain from us. Jesus died on the cross to take away our sins. Even if it isn't real, it still affects the brain. And there is lots and lots of research to show that that is the case. And it's very interesting to see that in another context after that. I've been reading up on those things.
So it's a very interesting thing. And one of the things that it's a lot of the work that I do now to this day with special operations, right, is we talk about spiritual fitness, right? Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because it's not one particular faith or religious belief or another, right? It's just spiritual fitness, right? So how do you define spirituality, right? And so this is where it gets really interesting. You start unpacking different layers, because that is a loaded question. Like, what is spirituality? What is your spirit, right? How do you have that discussion and that conversation? So one of the things I always put forward is it's your ability to articulate your intrinsic worth. Right now, the difference between what the extrinsic, what the external, what the world is telling you your worth is, versus what you feel internally your worth is, and what the
self-love is what is the way it was presented to me. Right? Exactly right.
And so, man, like that gets deep very, very fast.
It really does.
And also the challenge academically is, how do you measure it, right? Because we can sit there all day and talk psychosomatically, right? Like how you're feeling, like you would experience in a therapy session, right? But when you actually want to put numbers to it, right, to understand the quantitative intersections that exist there, that's where we need to be as far as science is concerned, right? And we're making our way there.
Right.
It's very
difficult. And it's difficult. I can't tell you, and this is just another like, I can't tell you how many times I have been to a counselor and had a conversation with them to be like, Kevin, like all you have to do is just not allow yourself to go to these dark places and think about yourself in a positive light.
Right.
And you're a great person, everyone likes you, but in the throes of depression, it's impossible. Right. But when you add into this spiritual component of the psilocybin or God or whatever you've done to help you to get to that point. Now, psilocybin does a little bit more because it kind of triggers your brain and shuts it off, which makes it easier for you to figure these things out. But it really is true. Like, we have a choice inside of us, deep innate in our conscious, to not go down these dark paths as long as we make ourselves not do that. We can control the physiological process of our brains when we don't go to that auditory method. Anyway,
but it's a really interesting thing that you just said though, Kevin, because truthfully, at the end of the day, what your therapist told you, right? The idea of don't allow yourself, don't choose not to. Yeah, but man,
Yeah.
what it takes
to do that.
master the decision-making process, right?
A higher power.
Man, but that is like one of the things that we always push in my discipline is make the harder choice every
Right.
time,
Right.
right? It's hard because it's something that at the end of the day, it's not comfortable. If it's not comfortable, there's no efficiency behind it, which means we have to explore that inner wilderness, right? Which is very important. So it kind of goes part and parcel. I know we just kind of derailed, man, about talking about the whole Columbia
No,
thing.
but it fits to the
Yeah.
whole big picture of what we're going to get to.
Yeah.
Why jiu-jitsu is effective in helping
doubt.
how we make the parallels between jiu-jitsu
Yes.
and PTSD. So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
without a doubt.
Perfect. So go ahead, back to Colombia. So we're good.
Yeah. So that whole entire discussion, I mean, that was for me. That was a discussion of a lifetime, right? Because I planted a seed that, man, I was not expecting to be planted, and I really started thinking about that because when you look at a lot of treatment protocols for PTSD, right? When I personally have a bone to pick with calling it a disorder, I don't believe PTSD is a disorder, right? I think it's an adaptation, right? When you are put in that environment over and over and over again,
Right.
of course you're going to have post-trauma incidences of flashbacks, and you're going to have. I mean, those are survival responses, man. Like if I'm reacting and responding a certain way, it's because I'm anticipating a fight, and my brain is telling
Right.
me, "Hey,
Anxiety and trauma are natural responses that keep us alive. And when we're animals, like when a bear is coming at you, the anxiety is
Right.
get the hell out of there. And
That's
it's
exactly
there to
right.
keep you safe. Now it can
Right.
control your life.
Yes.
But if you allow it to, when you get in those spaces too much. But
Yeah, that's
right.
exactly right. And
Right.
that's one of the things where now, right, in the kind of in the day and age that we live in, the stress response system, man, it gets triggered. Like the HPA axis, it is like it's flooded because every little thing is a stressor, right? Because we have created this hierarchy of what is worth stressing over, right? Whether it's the phone or the email or the social media or interactions with others. I'm not actually having a T-Rex come and try to bite my head off or a saber-toothed tiger who's hunting me, which in that case, that response makes sense. Now we have that same exact neurohormonal response
Right.
for silly stuff.
Yeah, because
Right?
my freaking Uber Eats is 15 minutes late, or I'm stuck in traffic for
Dude,
freaking
and
35 minutes. It's
horrible
actually
for your brain health.
Right.
Horrible. And we haven't caught up to the understanding of the embodiment of that yet. We're starting to. We're definitely starting to see, like there's an entire study around this thing called allostasis and allostatic load, which is the amount of stress that you carry at any given time. And this is also why one of the things that jiu-jitsu is so powerful, because it does give you an outlet to express yourself physically, which has a neurohormonal consequence in a very positive way. But allostasis and allostatic load, over the past 15, 20 years, our normal resting stress response system, right, has been, it's probably at least 2 or 3 times what it should be, right? So like we are dumping, man, cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all this stuff on a daily basis. And our bodies, like if that happens, fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Right.
Do something, burn that off. You don't burn it off. You just sit there and you ruminate. And that is the worst thing that can be done, man. And that drives challenges with mental health.
Right. Hey guys, so Heal Biogenics. If you're interested in any stem cells, peptides, lasers, they got lasers there, guys. Freaking sharks on lasers, sharks with laser beams. Heal Biogenics is the place for you. Located in several locations. They have one in South Tampa. They've got one in the Sarasota area. I think one in Wesley Chapel. Heal Biogenics, owned and operated by our good friend Miss Stacy. Stacy is amazing. If you're interested in any of those things, if you'd like to try some stem cells or peptides to get you right, I use them all the time. They're the best thing on the market. Go check out LaHeal.com, LaHealBiogenics.com. They are where it's at.
Go get it.
Classic Coaching. That's classic with a K. Mr. Connor Kovacs. Connor is a fellow guest on the show, alumni of the Old Man Grappling Hour. He is a nutritionist. I worked with him for a very long time. If you're interested in any of your nutrition goals, nutrition is a very important detail that a lot of people forget about in making your body as fit as you possibly can. Go check out Classic Coaching. That is classic with a K. Online nutritionist. He will get you right. ClassicCoaching.com. Classic with a K. You come back from Colombia.
Yeah.
We did the research on the reality of how a spiritual involvement can help to cure the pains of PTSD and help people reacclimate to society.
Yeah.
How do we go from there to working with American ex-military suffering from PTSD and how it affects jiu-jitsu helps them?
100%, right? So one of the things that for me, right? So I'd always been training since I was a kid, right? So I started with judo, got into some boxing, right? Got introduced to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu under Rob Conn.
Yeah, he
right?
trained
Right?
at the Cultus back
Yeah.
in like freaking 2002, 2001.
100%.
Yeah.
I got some awesome humble pie served to me at Cultus. It was great. But and I will tell you, man, of all the arts that I had trained in jiu-jitsu, it stuck a little differently, right? And I didn't understand quite why, but I knew that even like with judo, right? And I love judo to this day. I still train it, right? But the closeness that jiu-jitsu provides, right? So like if you think about it in a very primal sense, like, man, like if I'm on mount, right? My chest is on top of your chest, my neck is next to your neck. Like you have vital organs, right, that are touching each other. So in a very real sense, in a non-weird way, it's very intimate, right? Because like you've got certain positions, certain areas of your body where you're stuck, and it's a game of inches, right? And so it's slow, methodical movements that are happening.
It's a game of humping.
But yeah, it's funny. I was listening to a podcast right now about Oxycontin or oxycodone or oxytocin and its release
sure, and bonding,
and bonding and things like that. Right,
yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
right.
And it's a very real thing, like hugging. It's the same thing when it gets released, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. You have like a 20-second hug releases, like it's creepy how it works, but it really is true. It's really real scientific data about that.
Right. So like there's one aspect of our brains, like I have to win, right? I have to get the tap. But the other thing is I'm caring for my training partner. I don't want to hurt them.
Exactly.
Right? Because there's a brotherhood that exists between us, but we're still inflicting each other's will on one another.
Right.
So
exactly.
It's a very unique chess game, right? That is presented, and it can go the distance, right? Where versus like something that's a little more explosive, like boxing, right, or judo, right? It's like boom, boom, and as soon as a shot is landed or a thrown, an opponent gets hit, right? There's the point. Where in jiu-jitsu, you can roll for 45 minutes with the same person, right?
I've shared many intimate moments while rolling with Sonny Parlin, and it's been
we've been very intimate.
We spared some very.
I feel something. I don't know what it is, but I feel something there. Yeah. So that is something that I was thinking to myself. I wonder if that could be a potential modality to help with stress management, right? And so I know the effects it had on me training, right? And I didn't have nowhere near the type of experiences, right? Guys who had 11, 12, 13 deployments under their belt, getting into 10 firefights a week. I didn't have that, but I also saw what would happen when I would be sharing a mat with them and how they felt when they were done training, right? Or the next day, right? And then a couple of days would go by, they wouldn't show up, and then you could see them kind of start getting into this slump, right? So they needed that hit, they needed that dose of getting on the mat. So I wanted to unpack it. I'm like, all right, so if there are alternative ways to looking at trauma outside of a clinical sense, which has proven itself in Colombia, I saw it with my own eyes, there has to be other ways here from our perspective that we could approach this, right? And so clinical psychology has this thing called play therapy, right? Where you will see children and adults alike, right? Whether it's, drawing something or playing a board game or cards, whatever. The whole idea is let's take the energy that you're bringing to the table right now that may be filled with anxiety and stress, and let's channel it right into having you think strategically about something else and actually put it to use instead of you just sitting there and thinking over and over and over again in the same mental model, the same psychological loops. Let's put that energy to work for you. Why couldn't jiu-jitsu do the same thing, right? Especially since it's something that's part of their training, right? So Army Combatives, Marine Corps martial arts program as well. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu over the past 20 years has become a staple, a foundational component, right, in that training, right? And so since it was something that was part of their identity in the military, man, imagine if I could get out of the military and still carry that piece of me, even though I don't identify, I'm not an active duty SEAL, right, or Green Beret anymore, but I'm still nurturing parts of me that are combative and warrior ethos-centric in nature, but I'm not necessarily doing that. Maybe I'm going to the 8 to 5 job Monday through Friday, right? But I can still feed that part of me that is,
right. There was other parallels too, aside from just the actual physiological process and the scientific process of the hormones or the chemicals being released in the brain and all the other things like that. But there's the process of, these guys come back from a military deployment with hierarchies of soldiers and sergeants and platoon commanders and all these other things. And these guys are the ones with PTSD are the ones who were out in the shit. They had bad things go down. And in those firefights, those exchanges, they are looking to their commanders who have been there, done that for assistance. Now it's difficult for them, and part of the process for them to come back is when they come back, all of a sudden that hierarchy is gone. They are no longer surrounded by killers. They're working at some shitty job with Joe that didn't serve, that's their boss now, has no idea of where they're coming through, and it's hard for them to acclimate back into that reality. Right. And jiu-jitsu mimics that.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing about jiu-jitsu is you can't fake, right, your the position that you have. What I mean by that, right? It's like the hierarchy is not in a legitimate bona fide jiu-jitsu school. If you're rolling with a black belt and you're a blue belt, right, and a white belt, like he's playing with you, right? Like he's teaching you, right? But if he wanted to turn it on, he absolutely could turn it on. And it's not, and I know that there's phenoms out there, right? That kind of defy that, right? But what I mean by that is you can't fake becoming a 4-star general,
Right.
Like you have to put your dues in, right? It's not like you can just go and pay and a year and a half you get promoted to general,
Right.
In jiu-jitsu, that applies.
Or a platoon sergeant or
Whatever,
some kind
the
of commanded.
structure
Right.
is,
Exactly. Right.
Like, and how is it proven, right? Well, like if you roll with someone, right, who is at that level, you're going to feel it.
But in jiu-jitsu, it's a meritocracy. I mean, for the most part, it's a
Yeah.
meritocracy. In the armed services, though, it's not generally, or is it? I'm asking. Is it a meritocracy? Like
Excuse me while I Google a meritocracy.
when a general becomes a general, is it because of, because he earned it, or is it because he kissed ass?
So it depends, right? I mean, and this is me saying as someone who's never been in the military, right? Just as an outsider looking in, I would tell you that, when you're talking about someone who's a 2-star or a 3-star that is in charge of like SOCOM, right? Or all special operations, typically they've been there and done that, right? If you're talking about someone who is, a 3-star or a 2-star, and I'm not going to say any particular branch in general, right? But different branches have different jobs and what they do. Some are more combat boots on the ground oriented, some are. Is there an element of that? Yes.
Right. I mean, the commandant for the Marine Corps is honored and revered by his men. And the same, most generals that have served in wartime, which is that's the point we're making here. We're not talking about just because most people that go to the military, they don't have PTSD if they weren't deployed. They were living the life. And yeah, there's an administrative part to it. But when you're at war, that general that's running the war, for the most part, is a god to you.
Yeah.
If they're out there in the field with you.
The legit one, 100%. I mean, their men will follow them to hell and back.
And even pretend general is a bit of an inflated.
Sure, no, absolutely.
We're talking
Colonel,
even
major.
Someone that's actually in control of you in the field while you're out in the shit trying to stay alive under those circumstances.
And I will tell you, the ones that I have worked with and have come across, who are the real deal as far as they want to continue to be in the fight. They're not thinking about promotion. They're not thinking about working the ladder. What they're thinking about is, so when's the next mission, right? And other guys taken care of. That is a particular special type of breed of leader, right? Because look, at the end of the day, like you cut down leadership, so it's your ability to influence others to achieve a common objective. Influence. And it's just like with jiu-jitsu, right? Like when I roll with my coach and I feel like I'm helpless, and it's like, how does he minimal movement, but how does he make that happen, right? It blows my mind, right? I want to continue to learn that versus someone who's sitting and just pointing and telling. If you're out there and you're actually doing it,
right?
I'm all in.
And aside from a fucking handful, most jiu-jitsu now, jiu-jitsu gyms now, even if you're successful, that the leaders are rolling, and there's always going to be that purple belt, brown belt. It doesn't have to be the general.
Yeah.
It could be the purple belt, brown belt, the hierarchy.
So speaking of the jiu-jitsu, what were the tests you were doing at Grace Tampa South on the jiu-jitsu guys?
So a lot of that, right, was participant observation, right? And so what does that mean? So that means in my particular discipline, what we do is we take field notes on what's happening. So what I am witnessing, research participants, what's their interaction? What are they saying? What are they doing? How has their body language shifted, right? From the time that they walked in to the time that they walked out. What kind of roles were they having? What was the communication like? Emotional temperance, those sorts of things, right? As far as Gracie South specifically, right, there was a few focus groups that we did as well, interviews as well. Most guys, right, that I worked with, especially back then, now it would probably be a little bit different, but man, you're talking, this was 12 years ago, right? So I really wanted to do biological testing, right, to kind of see what's going on with cortisol and their cortisol levels and testosterone levels. The moment you start injecting that, people get a little uncomfortable, right? It feels a little too clinical, right? So I had to back off of that a little bit, right? So the majority of it was qualitative, right? Where I'm having those conversations, those discussions, the focus groups, the interviews.
You can just deduce from the answer.
Oh, 100%. Because then it's a cross comparison, right? So like you said this day, but the other day you said this, right? And then we dissect that, or then we unpack it, right? And creating a strong streamline of data. The data was good data.
So what did you find?
So here's the thing about it, right? So what's the really unique part? When we start talking about the biggest thing here is resiliency, right? But resiliency when it comes to identity management, right? And I really want to stress that component, right? Because this is where jiu-jitsu is very, very powerful, right? Like there is a confidence, right, that comes when you increase things like social capital, right? What's social capital? It's just a fancy way of saying your relationships. When you have relationships that actually mean something and they're not just like fake, let me just check the box, go, I know so-and-so. Like, no, like we're sweating together, we're bleeding together, like we're building something together, right? So an increase in social capital helps to increase confidence. Well, when you increase confidence, you give purpose, right? When you give purpose, you give someone a will to want to meet the next day with a smile versus I just got to get through next day, right? That's really big because if I'm coming back from deployment or I'm coming out of military service and I have camaraderie that was unparalleled, I would mean you literally like you're fighting for your life every single day with the same people, right? And you're protecting them and they're protecting you. That bond, it's because every single day we clocked in and we're kicking down doors and we're doing bad things to bad people, but we're doing it in protection of one another.
Yeah, the military people that I've talked to at my gym,
Yeah.
it's exactly what they say they miss is the camaraderie.
100%, right? So that's a huge thing, right? That's one component. And then stress response, how you deal with stress, right? So like walking, and this is a basic physiological thing, walking into the academy versus how you feel when you walk out. Well, if I'm in 5 o'clock traffic on my way to the academy and I've had a horrible day and I haven't trained in 3 days, how I'm going to respond to some road rage incident versus how I'm going to respond when I leave that night, guarantee there's going to be a difference, right? And so that in of itself, that translated to what's going on at home, right? So arguments with their spouse, how they dealt with stress from their children, right? Their parents, so on and so forth. So that was another powerful component, right? Third thing is when you start talking about not just the physical sense, but the idea of the warrior ethos, right? So when we start talking about ethos, we start talking about, again, going back to identity. Well, what is ethos, right? How is it that I can define myself and what it is that I was made? What's my purpose? Like, what is the reason why I'm walking this earth? And again, man, different definitions, different perspectives, different people. But most people who are training in the Jiu-Jitsu Academy, they got fight in them, right? Like they want to be able to have that physical expression and they want to learn how to chill and be effective with it. Well, if I also have an identity of being a Marine, of being a soldier, right, of being an airman, whatever it is, and I can no longer feed that part of me, but now I can feed this, and there's a ranking structure, right? And then I have people who fall in line, but then it's also a brotherhood that's being created where I can have this release, right, where I can let all the stress go of not just the day, but maybe things that are happening subconsciously, and it's safe and it's accepted socially. Man, like that's really powerful.
Isn't there also, I'm thinking back to some of the interviews we had before,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of taking notes as we go, because obviously I didn't do any research before this, but whatever. So isn't there a small part of what we talked about too that correlates to the actual danger? Like there's the idea that they were somewhat recreating the life or death situations that they experienced overseas in a friendly manner with someone that they trust that recreates those scenarios to help them cope with what they missed overseas, right?
110%, right? So like the vulnerability aspect, right? So like if you're working a rear naked choke on me, right, and we're drilling, right, and I'm voluntarily giving up, right, that position for you to feel, right, you literally at that moment, like you have the ability to kill me, right? But there's a sense of control because I know my release is, that's it, right, and it's over. That in of itself, it empowers them to have this idea of control over death, right, where perhaps they didn't have that when they were deployed, right? Because what happens is whatever's going to happen, right? There is no tap out, right? So for them to be able to feel that sense of I can stop, I can shift, and I can reset what's happening here, that the power of the reset, which is the tap, man, like that in the research that I did, that really highlighted itself.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I was going to get to. That, and I remember specifically you had a few points you were talking about how a reset can also help them to review things that might not have gone as well, that they might hold. Like a buddy of theirs died under their control, that, you know, in their situations that maybe they couldn't do anything about, but they harbored that. The idea of that reset helps them restart over again.
110%, right? So like when you're going through the process of, let's say I get into a bad position, right? So Sonny, you and I are rolling, right? And I make a mistake, right? And then I get tapped because of that mistake. In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I want to do that again, right? But I want to figure out what the solution is this time, right? Where they didn't have that opportunity, right? When they were deployed out. But this idea of there's always a way out, right? There's always a solution, right? You just have to be at the frame of mind and have the knowledge to apply it in a calm manner, right? To be able to work through whatever that is. So the idea of you can work through whatever the challenge is. It doesn't have to be on the mat. It applies to life, right? Whatever it is, right? Take your time and work through it. You just have to find what the right solution, what the right response is. For them, when you're thinking about times where they made the wrong move, they opened the wrong door, they shot the wrong person, there is no going back to that, right? What's done is done. But the idea that now in this next chapter of my life, it's not that way. That's a breath of fresh air, right? And from an identity management perspective, it allows me to add another feather in my cap to say, yes, that was Soldier Kevin back then, right? That is still a part of me, right? But this is Kevin 2.0, and this is how Kevin 2.0 deals with adversity, trauma, conflict.
It's amazing, man. I can't tell you how many of these now, after I've done more work on myself with therapy. I have some PTSD issues that have bothered me for years. I didn't go to war, but I've got pretty well known. But going through and starting to recognize that it is a process of just rethinking the directions in which you let your brain travel. Mm-hmm. And as long as you can start to think that, as long as you can see a way to do that, like it's you're capable of doing those things. You don't have to go down those dark paths anymore. You can follow it in the opposite direction if you know you have that choice. And it takes time.
That's right.
And you have to continue working at it, but you can do it if you try.
That's exactly right. So one of the things we always say, right, is the quality and depth of relationship you have with yourself will always define the quality and depth of relationship you can have with somebody else, right? The thing about jiu-jitsu that's so unique is every single time you step on that mat, and once you get to a certain place, I think in your training and your maturity, right, in jiu-jitsu, you understand that the training that you're doing is not just the perfection of technique and timing and range, right? It's also the perfection of character, right? And understanding the mental processes that you're going through and how you are framing your mind when you're stepping into that role or that drill or whatever it is. And then when you take the principle of that and you apply it to everyday life, man,
it's
bro, things change.
It's astounding. It really is.
It changes.
I mean, I can't tell you, owning a jiu-jitsu school, and Until Sonny's the same way too, being a jiu-jitsu practitioner, being a jiu-jitsu coach, like I truly believe that I am doing way more than just teaching people how to grapple. Like I believe that learning how to fight is almost the second or third most important thing of what we do in a jiu-jitsu academy. You know what I mean? It really is to me. And especially now that I'm starting to work with kids, the ability to be able to think under the duress of a real life fighting situation is such an invaluable tool that 90% of the world never have an opportunity to even tap into.
Absolutely.
We're so controlled by our anxieties and by our fight or flight mechanisms, unless we delve deeply and put ourselves into those fires over and over again. Most people don't even recognize they have them.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Bless them. I mean, some people, everybody has problems, but most people have never been put into the situation where they really have to recognize what those fight or flight mechanisms are.
Absolutely.
The unique part of jiu-jitsu, and one of the reasons why I feel like jiu-jitsu is the greatest martial art for self-defense on the planet, and I say this all the time in class, isn't necessarily because the techniques of jiu-jitsu are far superior. Obviously, me and Sonny could make that debate. I could sit here and debate with anybody. Yeah, that fucking bullshit wrist lock is stupid.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. Right? But what makes jiu-jitsu the greatest martial art for self-defense is the ability to utilize that and tap into that fight or flight mechanism, that real life fighting environment over and over and over again. Why? Because it's a safe environment, because we're tapping, we're not punching each other in the face, we're grappling on the ground, we're choking and we're manipulating joints and we're pinning people in a very high stress scenario.
Absolutely.
But in those scenarios, we start to think and we start to learn how to maintain calm, which in a situation where you have to defend yourself, that's the most important part. Huge.
Right.
That's where everybody that getting tired, exasperated, going into that lizard brain limbic system, right?
Yep.
The jiu-jitsu community loves to manipulate joints.
Yeah, exactly. That's the look at that. We're still there, son. You're here, baby. I know you're still with us, boo boo. So the point now is, and this is when we start to talk about people with PTSD, or just people in general, that have issues with their psychology. When you've gone through those fires every day in the gym,
that's right.
What happens now when you go to a freaking store, you go to Starbucks to get your latte, and the little girl puts extra sugar in there because she's 19 and stupid, or and doesn't know what the hell she's doing.
You wreck the place.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but obviously. But after that, you go outside and you think about things, and maybe you come back and apologize. Right. No, but you learn how to maintain cool, and this is that. I think it's a big thing.
You go viral.
You go viral, of course. You become a celebrity. Right? It's a tough go to it. Right? And jiu-jitsu gets you there.
But you know what's really interesting about that?
With jiu-jitsu, the ability to fuck up.
Now you can do more damage. And nobody can stop you. go join jiu-jitsu, guys. Show over. Dr. Gino, thanks for stopping by.
But truly, the interesting thing about that, man, is it's a way of life, right? Like, what I mean by that is, so if you look at some of the ancient culture, like ancient practices, right? Like, there was always a distinct separation between warrior class and civilian class, right? Because it was a very different way of looking at life. It was a very different way of, most importantly, interpreting death, right? Like the importance and understanding of death. So like when you look at the roots of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Going back to its connection with Judo and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and going all the way down the line, right? When you look at why it is that samurai culture, right? They literally, like, they were pinpoint target accuracy, perfection in everything they did. Not just the way in which they did empty hand combat or use the wakizashi or use the katana or any of those things, right? Like how I make tea, how I fold my kimono, how I walk. Like there's entire studies, man, entire ways in which they lived their life were really embodied life in every breath because it could be gone like that, right? Where most civilians, man, we're in a grind Monday through Friday. We're not thinking that way, right? Jiu-Jitsu, when you start looking at it in terms of the fight in of itself, it's part of what I do every single day, right? Because to your point, you can go 100%, right, in a controlled environment where you're safe, but you're also practicing your craft. And the whole entire intent of what you're doing is to strive for perfection, right? You're never going to get it, right? But that's the purpose, right? But it's a perfection where you're refining the way in which you think under stress and the way in which you apply your character to push through stress. And that's a very, very powerful thing that you do not see a lot of modern martial arts offer that opportunity, right? Because I'm going to go 100% in the boxing gym, dude.
You can't do it. You can't do it. Yeah, you can't do it. Right.
Right. And the same thing, man. Like if I'm going to go and do randori 100% in the judo gym, like, dude, my knees are going to get. Am I going to break something? Like
I always make this analogy too, and I'm not that guy that likes to talk shit about other martial arts. I'm not. I mean, I truly believe if you spent and dedicated your life to karate or taekwondo, you did not waste your time.
Of course not.
You know what I mean? You gained. Sonny disagrees with me.
Well, it depends on the martial art,
right? But I mean, you earned belts. You learned discipline, and like if you can punch your fist through a fucking brick or kick your freaking foot around in the air, like that is not a wasted thing. Like
Right.
you can do some damage with that.
Right.
The reality or the difference is application. Because I don't care how many times you put your fist through a brick, unless that brick is trying to hit your back, it ain't the same goddamn thing.
Yeah.
And I don't care how many times you practice taking a plastic knife out of somebody's hand until someone's trying to kill you with that fucking knife.
Right.
It ain't the same goddamn thing. I had a friend of mine that was a federal officer that did some special forces stuff, and he did a lot of. I knew he was into that shit. And I had a friend of mine's girlfriend that wanted to do knife fighting. And I kept saying, do jiu-jitsu. She's now I want to do knife fighting. So I asked him one day, I said, hey, bro, do you know anywhere where she could do some knife fighting? He told me, he said, bro, tell her to go train jiu-jitsu. And I said, well, she's really adamant. She wants to do a knife fight. I said, I'll tell you what. He sent me a video of what a prison knife fight looks like. Oof. And he said, show her this. And then if she still wants to train knife fighting, you tell her to come do knife fighting. It ain't how you draw it up in the room. That ain't how the shit goes down.
No.
Right.
No.
It ain't the fucking flipping the knife, and that ain't how shit happens.
Right.
Some dude comes up, shanks you, and then you're dead. Right. Facts.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
100%. Man. And I'm the same way. By no stretch, it's not a calling out of other martial arts. Like, I think every martial art has something great to offer. I really, truly do. Right. But to your point, what's the application? Like, what's the goal that you're going for? What are you seeking to achieve within that particular discipline, right? If we're talking about strictly self-defense, which for me, why I chose to dissect, right, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and its effect on folks that are in the military community that have PTSD, it has everything to do with, the application of it. Well, it's already being utilized in combative training, right? So as far as the efficacy of it, that's already proven itself, right? Because if the military has chosen to include it in their close quarter combat training, that kind of tells you, right, what the standard is, right? And then outside of that, there's me having trained it myself, right? There's a belief that I have in it and the therapeutic effects of what that means as far as being able to manage and deepen their sense of identity and deepen their sense of maturity, right? Not as a warrior, but as a human being, right? And how you deal with trauma and how you deal with stress. Because, man, like, I will tell you, even to this day, some of the most stressful moments that I have, I will go back to moments like where I'm training with Rob or I'm training with Roddy, right? And like, knee on belly, and it's absolutely miserable, right? And you just stay calm, breathe, and you know what to do. Just do it, right?
Right.
To this day, I still go through that, right? So it's like moments that you don't forget.
And now when you're having a panic attack, and you feel like the world is crushing in on you, you start to realize that the panic attack is not dictating how we go from here. The panic attack is just the problems that you're suffering from.
Exactly.
We can still live. I still live my life. I still go out and do things. I'm actually having a little panic attack right now. But like I can still focus and do the right things because That's where it goes. Like you
That's
don't.
it.
It's
you
it's
can
it.
still focus.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
So it's like, yes, you may get bucked off the horse.
Right.
But you know what it takes to get back on.
Exactly.
And that's a question of decision making of, do I stay off and do I just sit here and ruminate, or I'm like, wipe it off, nah, man, get back on, let's go. Right.
Get busy living or get busy dying.
That's
I
right,
just
dude.
watched Shawshank Redemption this weekend on vacation.
Nice.
we had a raining days and we watched
Nice.
Shawshank Redemption.
Nice.
Hey guys, if you're interested in any of your physical therapy needs, physical training, physical therapy, go check out Charlie Keenan at Rewire. Rewire is the best. I've worked with Charlie for probably the past, 2 years now, 3 years now. He is absolutely amazing. The best guy I've ever worked with. And believe me, I've worked with a lot. He is also an alumnus of the show. If you want to go back and check him out, listen to him talk about the wonderful things he does, the amazing things he can do for you. If you want to get fit, go check out Charlie at rewire.com. All right, guys. So if you're looking for hydration needs, maybe you're not feeling too well, you want a little extra vitamin boost in your body, go check out Active Health and Wellness. Active Health and Wellness is a mobile IV unit owned by my very good friend and student, Melinda. She is absolutely amazing. If you're interested in getting a mobile IV or an IV in your body at some point, she will come directly to your house. She works primarily in the Tampa Bay area, Newport Richey, Trinity area, Wesley Chapel area. However, I'm sure she would come to you wherever you are. Go check her out at Active Health and Wellness. They are absolutely amazing. Tell me, friends of the Old Man Grappling Hour. Great movie, folks at home. Stephen King's a sponsor. Check him out. New sponsor, Stephen King. Sonny, what do you think, buddy? Anything? Got anything to add?
Negative.
Negative.
I do
Well,
not.
we got a few more questions. I got.
Throw it at me, bro.
So, man, we've been doing. Let me look at my list. We've been doing kind of off the cuff here. Let me see where we're at so far.
I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah,
I knew it was gonna
we
happen.
have such a freaking rapport. Like I
Do you
literally, we
still
literally.
train jiu-jitsu.
So I've actually, it's been probably, my daughter's 8 months old now, right? So since she was born, I've slacked off.
Yeah.
I will own that 100%.
Are you a black belt?
No, I'm a purple belt
In jiu-jitsu?
in jiu-jitsu and a brown belt in judo.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yep.
Bro, keep
Working
plugging,
on it, bro.
baby.
You know the
Keep
deal,
plugging,
man.
baby. Man,
To me, dude, it's always been
you're a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Me and Sonny are assholes. We don't do jiu-jitsu. It's a
What do you-
little bit easier for us to get our black belts.
Train at Carlson Gracie?
no. Well, I trained under Roddy Ferguson.
Oh, okay. You train with him.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So his lineage is
Roddy-
Where is Roddy's gym?
So
Close,
he's in
right?
Oldsmar.
Oh, he's in Oldsmar
He's in
now. Yeah,
Oldsmar,
he moved. That's right.
He's
Yeah.
in Oldsmar.
What's
Yeah.
his academy
There.
called?
Tampa, Florida Judo.
What is
Yeah.
it?
Tampa, Florida Judo.
Tampa, Florida.
He used to be right down the street. He used to be over in Brandon for a little while.
Yeah, he
it
was.
a long
Matter of
time
fact, I
ago.
started with him back when he was in
But
Brandon.
Roddy's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, right?
He's under. He's under.
I believe
he's
Roddy's
under.
just got his fourth
Oh my
strike.
God, under Laborio. Yeah.
Yeah, he's on the board.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's an original ATT guy,
Yeah.
and as well as a judo Olympian and a
Yeah.
freaking
I've
undefeated.
met Roddy a few times when he came to North.
Roddy's awesome. Roddy is one of my
is.
at the equal parts one of the one of my favorite people, and sometimes a freaking Roddy's Roddy. Roddy's a great dude, man.
Yeah.
We're definitely gonna have him on a show. We'll get him on here
should,
eventually, man. He's a great guest. I've had him on a few other interviews. Yeah. So segueing again now, I know that you've done a lot of work with the We Defy organization.
Yeah.
The We Defy organization
Solid
is a place that's
organization.
very dear to my heart. We've had a lot to do with them. I was involved with a lot of their stuff from the ground floor, and I still see those guys at events and talk to them about the TJ and some of the other
Such
dudes.
good
Like,
people,
so
man.
tell us a little bit about what they offer and the services they offer to the folks at home.
Yeah, dude. So it's an amazing thing, man, and they have grown exponentially. Like even like when you first introduced me to TJ, like to now, I think they're helping so many people. So essentially, what they do is they're a nonprofit organization, and they sponsor jiu-jitsu training for veterans for a year. Right. So there's an application process. You submit your application. They will have a school that they have vetted in your local area. And if they haven't vetted one in your local area, they'll typically send an ambassador out to check it out. Make sure the instructor's legit. Make sure it's a good environment for a vet, right? And they pay full tuition for a year.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, there's no reason why, man, if you want this training, you absolutely can get it. And they make sure that you can get it.
Yeah, the We Defy organization has been around for a very long time, and they're about 5-6 years now, 7 years now.
They've
And
never contacted me.
you have to you can hit them up. I guarantee you they'll make a slot for you. They'll love you, dude. Yeah, they're super freaking involved in the jiu-jitsu community. They're always sponsoring the sponsoring the ADCC. They got events or tents at the ADCC, all the IBJJF events.
Nice.
And I remember back in the old jiu-jitsu times days, I did a couple interviews with him. I feel one of my one of my proudest things is the fact that I feel somewhere inside of me that I had something to do with helping them get recognition at a very early time in their lives, and it's pretty cool.
Just salt. I mean, like truly, like salt of the earth people.
Yeah,
like,
super good dudes, man. Super good dudes, man. So moving forward, right?
Yeah,
What do you feel like? What do you feel like should happen in the future with jiu-jitsu practitioners and PTS guys? Do you think that there is an avenue for them to start to think of training as a viable application? Because I know that one of the things that we did talk about when we start to go back to that clinical versus spiritual is that a lot of these guys, when they come back from overseas, that they're very adverse to getting help. Because none of them want to be sick. Mm-hmm. None of them want to accept the fact that they have a problem, and that's just huge in the world of male freaking psychology. Anyway, no one wants to admit they're sick. I'm fine. Yeah, everything's fine. So they're adverse to going to the clinical processes.
There's a lot of stigma.
Right.
And here's the tough part of it, right? Like. And not throwing any of like colleagues of mine, right, in the behavioral sciences or psychology or psychiatry under the bus, right? But like we've missed the mark, right? Like truly, like when it comes to dealing with these sorts of issues, these sorts of challenges, showing up to a room where there's someone wearing a white coat, right, and asking you questions about how you're feeling and what do you think, that has no bearing whatsoever to understand, right, what it's like to be in the suck, right, what it's like to be downrange, what it's like to even handle a firearm or an explosive or to experience that level of loss in combat. And I'm not saying that it's a prerequisite, right? But it's just the approach. What is the approach that's being utilized, right? And maybe instead of a therapist, it's talking to someone who's a little older, a little wiser, who's been there, who's gone through therapy, right? That can at least get you on track, right? So like, are you open to the possibility of having a conversation, right? But then also understanding that, look, you're not just dealing with the mind, right? There's other parts with other components. This, again, identity management. There's a lot of different components to someone's identity. I ask, like anytime I do workshops, man, I do a lot of hands-on work with Army Special Operations. And I always ask everyone the simple question, who are you? Right? And like, you want to talk about having a long discussion. I can imagine.
Right.
And so a lot of times they'll tell me their name. Like that's great. That's your name. You're not telling me who you are. Right? Tell me who you are.
Dude, this reminds me of the movie Anger Management.
Great goosebump. Whatever that word is, man, that Nicholson used. It's a great movie.
The anger sharks are circling.
No.
The anger sharks are circling.
I simply asked who you are. I don't want to know your name or your personality traits or your job.
It's such a real thing, though. Like, Sonny, I swear to you, dude, but it's an incredibly effective, using the right setting, right? It's a very effective tool, right?
To piss someone off.
So but also like retrospectively, they're like, dude, do I not even know who I am?
Because they associate themselves with the horrible things that they've done.
Bingo.
As opposed to like, that doesn't have to be who you are. It's funny. I had one of the things that is difficult for me to reconcile, one of the things that I dealt with a lot with my own mental health struggles, was the reality of this dualistic person. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a person who did some horrible, shitty things to survive for a long time. Right, to cope with the problems. And then there's the great person that is Kevin Gallagher that everyone knows and loves. One of the things that people tell me all the time is like, you feel so shitty about yourself. I've never met a person in the world that has a bad thing to say about you. You know what I mean? And like, I'm not using that to pat myself in the back.
But it's a real thing.
They haven't talked to me.
They haven't talked to Sonny yet. But you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. I'm amazing. The folks at home know that. But the truth of the matter is that both of those persons or both of those people are the same person, and that's okay.
100%.
You know what I mean? And that's the struggle that we deal with. That like there doesn't have to be a light and a dark. There just has to be who you are.
100%.
And you recognize that, and it helps with the process.
So one of the things, right, that's really important on this one, right, is understanding your own value alignment, right? Because here's the thing, those dark and terrible things that you perceive as dark and terrible, right? I am sure somewhere down the line, there was a justification to yourself as to why you needed to do it to honor the value system that you carry as a person, right? It could be survival. It could be to help someone else, but you have to do this horrible thing to help somebody else. Whatever it is, right? When you get to a place of understanding at a 40,000 foot view and you're looking at yourself, right? And you're like, okay, I did it. I don't like how it made me feel, right? But I understand why I did it, right? And then you move on. Problem is we have a really hard time.
Moving on is all part,
right? It's a choice. It's a decision, right? Just like, and again, going back to jiu-jitsu, right? Like you are stuck in this horrible position right now. So you've got a couple choices. which choice are you going to make, right? Because once you make it, you commit to it, right? And commit to that decision, commit to that choice, right? In order to get to the other side. Because if you don't commit fully, it's not going to work, right? It's no different in our decision-making process, right? So this is where, like, the deeper I go, even to this discipline of study that I'm doing, because even to this day, I'm still learning new things about the research that I did, right? As it matures, as time goes on, that's just the nature of research, right? Man, it applies to everything. And there's so many important nuggets that come along the way just based off of collectivity. Two people doing something, a joint activity together where there's adversity and it's stress and it sucks because I'm tired and I'm exhausted, but we're all working towards the both of us are working towards an end goal, right? If we both are on the same page on what we value at that moment in time, well, I value your health, I value my health, but at the same time, I value the skill set that I'm trying to develop, right? With this thing called jiu-jitsu. And you share the same thing, right? So now there's a mutual respect there. And that covers or that gets embodied to your own personal identity.
And all of that over the long haul equals a spiritual experience. It helps us believe. And it's amazing the more I know about the mind, the reason why things work is because we make ourselves believe that we believe that they work. And if there's no answer to it, there's no reason why. I don't have to know why.
No.
I just have to believe it.
Now you're talking faith.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
Right.
There we go. There we go.
100%. Yeah.
One more question, and I'll let you go. Just
Yeah,
this
all
is
good.
a cue, and we're getting up on an hour. Sonny hates it when I
good,
do
man.
this. We're getting close to that hour mark. So, there's. I don't want to be this guy because I don't really know. I don't like to talk conspiracy theories and shit like that. But there seems to me that there is the medical world that is surely lacking in the idea of some of the things that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And particularly some of the ways that maybe the military complex could start to recognize, hey, look, this shit is working. These are things that work.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, the pharmaceutical company wants to make money, whatever reason, dogmatic old men that don't want to change their views. Like,
Right.
have you seen any uptick in this new philosophies of treatment? And if not, what do you think it's going to take to get us there?
So this is the really interesting part, man. When you start talking about alternative modalities, right? So like I am really into right now the science of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, right? Red light therapy, photobiomodulation, right? Contrast therapy, right? So hot, cold, doing the ice plunge, and then doing the sauna, that whole thing, right? Dude, the results are pretty amazing, right? And this is just on a purely physical sense, right? You start talking about the mindfulness things, right? The mind working things, and you combining both of them, right? Like the short answer to your question is, where do I see it going? Do I see that being a trend? I do. Do I think there's going to be massive pushback from the pharmaceutical industrial complex? Absolutely, right? Because if there's actually a way that we have figured out that doesn't require us to get prescription medications filled every single week or every other week or whatever the case is, right? But just by doing a reset or a reboot, right, of our own mind and our own body, and we can do it ourselves, that is power. Like that is a lot of power, right? And
and honestly, at this point, I think there's more freaking research to show that SSRIs don't work than they do work. I mean, or at least it's 50-50
right?
and all the other shit that comes with it. Exactly, right.
Right. And so, and it's not to say that there's not a time and a place, man.
Right.
Like, 100%.
Exactly. I'm not trying to say if you need medication, take medication.
100%, right? But when we're looking at it in the long-term view,
Right.
of what it takes to make a sustainable change and get onto the journey, the path of self-healing.
And the amount of yourself that you might lose while you're taking these freaking
100%. I
Right.
think now, because of the age of information that we live in, right? Big Pharma has a heck of a fight, right? And I'm not saying Big Pharma's the one doing the oppressing, but I got questions.
Yeah,
I will say,
exactly.
I definitely got questions.
Yeah, of course,
right?
of course.
It doesn't add up to me, right? But again, what's the old saying, man? Follow the money,
Yeah.
right? And the money doesn't lie.
Yeah, and the money
right?
doesn't lie at all.
So I certainly hope this is the way of the future. I will tell you, I mean, you've got guys like Huberman, right, that are putting out some really great stuff, right, as far as data. Jordan Peterson's another one as well, right? Like, and that's awesome. It's open access for anybody, right, to be able to dial into. Whether you agree with it or not, it's still worth a conversation.
Yeah.
It's still worth a discussion, right? It's still worth exploration, right?
And
So
I think we live in a world where we're so dogmatic about belief systems that I think sometimes we miss the idea that there could be some truth in other people's opinions.
Oh, yeah.
It's an unfortunate world we live in, but I think we're starting to come together. I think the big picture is starting to show itself.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I mean, there are things that I'm not just researching, I'm trying myself, right?
Yeah.
And it's, I am noticing things, right? So like, which is cool. Like I really, and I dig that part of it. So I'm working on a few things now to really like create robust studies behind them. And that's kind of the next chapter.
Great, man.
Yeah, man.
Well, dude, man, like, I think that's good, son. You got anything else you want to add, man? Yeah.
If you like having orgasms.
Sonny Parlin.
Don't take SSRIs.
That's a good point.
Profound, Sonny.
Profound,
brother.
Honestly, there is wisdom in that little tune. Dr. Gino Collura, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. He yelled at me. I knew I thought about it the whole time. I knew I was going to screw it up. Thank you so much, man. That was a great show. Once again, I knew you were going to be a great guest, man. I'm super happy to have you on the show, man. Anything you want to plug? Anybody you want to talk about? Anything you want to throw out there? You got a few minutes,
as
man?
always, man, big shout out to We Defy. Big shout out, man, to the entire Gracie Tampa network.
Yeah.
I love you guys. You guys are doing great stuff in our community. I got to give a shout out to my coach, Dr. Ferguson.
We're getting you on, Roddy. You're coming.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And no, brother, you guys keep putting the good word out there, man. It's
Yeah,
good
man.
stuff, dude.
Absolutely.
Good stuff, man.
Thank you so much for your time, Sonny. We good?
No judges needed.
We'll do that after. We'll stay for a
okay.
second. We'll do the reels. We're gonna get you're gonna see our ads throughout the course of the show. But Rod, go ahead.
You
hit the
already
music.
have.
You already have. Cue the music. Thank you very much, Dr. Gino. You're the best.
Thanks.